I think the first one that is just kind of an easy tell for me, at least, is they can't really define what they want. And this isn't always a red flag, because there is a discovery process that you go through and educating the client and helping them understand exactly, especially a homeowner. Hey, here's how this process works. Here's what's possible. Here's what's not possible. Here's maybe a mood board, for example, of what we could turn your home into. That's part of it. What I mean by they can't define what they want is you've already gone through that process, and it's just back and forth like a seesaw. Like, oh, I want this, or oh no, wait about this, and then they're constantly changing.
Yeah. I think another way to say that is they can't make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
And early on, slow decisions are maybe a little to be expected, but if they're chronic, they're going to blow everything up. And of course, it's going to be your fault.
Yeah, I think.
So that's a
Uh,
good one.
yeah, I think that's one that you don't necessarily get right away on the first phone call, but if by the third time you're together, there's still no direction, this is probably the case. So the next one, number 2, is about timeline and budget and just being completely unrealistic. And this is something that I think for a lot of contractors, they shy away from sometimes. They don't necessarily figure out on that first phone call that, oh, I've got a lead. Well, let's qualify them by understanding their budget and their timeline. And if you wait too long if you're still going to their house to figure that stuff out, then you've asked too late, in my opinion. You've got to figure that stuff out earlier. What is their timeline? What is their budget? And being unrealistic with it isn't just you tell them how long it'll take, and then they're like, oh, that's not good enough, whatever. That's an easy one. The hard ones are more so we're finally getting into the work, and they're now asking for the small things to be done really quickly or to be done yesterday. And then they're complaining about every little single change order that comes up and every little cost and wanting to get it down. And I don't know. What is your thought on this?
Well, my thought is you want to spot that kind of, if you're at that point where you're already having to make those decisions and changes, you've missed the boat. We want to
Yeah.
spot that in advance. And I think that the way you described an inability to make a decision is a real red flag.
Yeah.
They can change their minds, but at a rational rate.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got indecisiveness. We've got unrealistic expectations in terms of timeline and budget. The next one that I've got reminds me of being in high school and going to the local Mexican restaurant and ordering a sopapilla so that I can get unlimited chips and queso for lunch. Um, and essentially, this one is the self-sourcing customer who wants to get all the materials, or even have, one of their friends help with some of the labor, or do the a la carte service, basically, and order
Right.
from the a la carte menu, but get all the benefits of working with you, the chips and queso and salsa, if you will, right? Um, so I think that's a huge red flag and never something that you should jump into.
Yeah, it raises all sorts of issues. Like if they do source something and you put it in, there needs to be a clear understanding. What if it's damaged? What if it's not the right part? I had a pool builder who had people ordering their controller and they just didn't order the right one. And well, it said it was, and then who's responsible? Who's going to fix it? Who's going to pay for it? Yeah, that's a tough one. And the other thing is a little bit in general here. I like to see people itemize the things that their client is going to get, but they don't price them individually. And people will complain about that. They want to know your labor and all this. Well, frankly, it's not any of their business because the price, it's what you're getting worth the price or not. And if you get into that, then they start saying, well, just what you said, my brother-in-law and I can wire up the garage ourselves on Saturday, right? So
Yeah.
we'll take that off. Pretty soon you've pulled out a lot of things. Your margin is not the same. And so if you're running across town to put up one brick is not the same thing as going across town and building a brick fence.
Yeah.
One has margin in it. The other one doesn't. So yeah, people who really want to nitpick and do it themselves or privately source their own stuff, there's some of that's legit. And, but really it's a bad sign if they're sounding like they want to do that.
Yeah. I think it's too much micromanagement. And I mean, they should just be their own GC at that point,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And
yeah,
good luck with that.
good luck.
Find out how hard could it be?
Absolutely. Yeah. So next one is excessive haggling. It also kind of gets into what you've just said with the margins, wanting to know your margins, which is the fifth point I have here. But excessive haggling and going back and forth on a variety of things. And it's not necessarily even just haggling about price, but it's haggling about time. It's haggling about, little decisions that need to be made, like haggling about how to file the permit, for example. Like, just there's so many things that could.
Where did you come up with that idea?
Oh well, we'll get
We'll
into that in
talk
a
about it.
minute. Yeah, but there's all these decisions that need to be made. Not all of them are around price, but at the end of the day, there's like if they're wanting to micromanage too much and get involved in what is not their responsibility as a customer, it's a red flag. They need to stay in their lane, just like you need to stay in your lane. You don't need to question every little design decision they've made. If they want hooks instead of towel racks, let them make that decision, right? That's their lane. So anyways, excessive haggling, wanting to know your margins or wanting to know your line items. That's the one that you brought up. Next one here is just no boundaries. The customer that texts you in the middle of the night or calls you 3 times in a row or doesn't, sends 3 emails a day. There's boundaries that need to not be crossed. The ones that tell your employees what to do. Like there's just boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. And if someone crosses boundaries regularly, you should be able to see some of those things early on, right?
Right. Especially if you're looking for them.
Yeah. We have a mutual friend, connection, and I feel really bad because I referred my neighbor to him. This is for a roof right after a storm. We got our roof replaced. I've got a neighbor who is a really good family friend, great person as an individual. Probably the worst customer I could have sent to him. And she was literally getting up on the roof to watch the workers and making sure they were doing a good job. And that's just a boundary you should not be crossed.
Yeah.
So
She should not be on the roof. And what makes you think she could recognize it was done well or not? Man,
yeah.
I didn't know about that.
Oh
I
man.
thought you were going to go the other direction. You were sorry you recommended a client to this.
No,
I
he went
mean, a
above and beyond, but it was just like the Nightmare on Elm
client from
Street
hell.
project. Yeah,
Yeah.
client from hell.
Oh my
Gosh.
gosh.
Yeah. Fun times. Okay. So the next one, the way that I've phrased this is customer supremacy, where they think that the
Yeah.
customer is always right. And I think that could be right if you're going through the drive-through and yeah, the customer is always right. Let's give them extra chicken nuggets or, free fries, whatever, get on with it. But in terms of a construction project worth tens of thousands of dollars, the customer is not always right. And you don't always need to be giving customer concessions. And if they come into the mindset of like, you are my servant because I'm paying you, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
There's needs to be a mutual amount of respect that we're a partner in this project. We're trying to see this through to completion and make sure it's a success together. And we will
Yeah.
cooperate with each other and work together to make that a reality. As soon as they start saying that, like blaming you for things, making excuses, and really directing you about things that they shouldn't be
And
directing
that
you on, it's over the top.
communication that you talked about when they're texting you all the time and demanding, why didn't you call me back? And yeah, if there's one thing, my father used to say, the customer is not always right. However, the customer is always important until
That's a good
maybe you
point.
fire. So it is a good point, but they're obviously not always right. But absolute de minimis, you do not go below this. You are equals. You are equals. You don't take a bunch of crap off of anybody, any of that servant stuff. Matter of fact, as my son says, I love this attitude and sound. He goes, maybe they need us a little more than we need them.
Yeah.
And in fact, we are the superior. in that, we know what's going on. They want this project. They need education. They need it done right. Need the permits filed, all this stuff. We're the ones who know how to do that. We don't need them
No.
unless, because of our mental condition, we think we do because we're chasing sales.